This is partly in response to the great societal Take Back UK and a few of his videos that I've been listening to while I've been driving, so I haven't been able to pay the closest attention to watching. It's more a case of listening. And he talks about the victims of grooming gangs, and from the point of view of the care homes that they are often staying in. And as a father of young daughters, in fact today I was able to spend time with my 4-year-old daughter, just 2 hours, but that was wonderful. And so I have a very strong sense of protection towards her and her older sister. And I don't have, he was also talking about laying down the law. Not in the, he didn't describe it in those words, but being a strict parent and not accepting nonsense and laying down clear boundaries. Now, the situation I'm in, I'm not really able to do that. I only see my children for little snippets, little windows of time. And most of the time, I don't see them. I haven't read them a bedtime story for over 2 years now. And that sucks. That's really shit. So I can only be a positive influence to a very limited degree, and I have very little control over what happens to them. But hopefully those things will change and I will be able to spend more time with them. But the other thing which he mentioned is consequences for the parents of the children the parents who are negligent, and as well as the perpetrators of these crimes. And I wholeheartedly agree. And he talks about, locking people up who are irresponsible enough to have children and not take care of them. Then that raises the question of, we keep hearing that our jails are filled to capacity. And then, our numpty of a prime minister, one of the first things he did was release a whole load of prisoners, and there's the whole thing of, oh, don't lock people up, rehabilitate them. Now, in principle, that might work some of the time, but I don't think that's much of a deterrent. There are many things, like listening to the Lotus Eaters and Carl Benjamin, and Rupert Lowe, and they talk about bringing back the death penalty. And I hesitate about endorsing that, because I always think, well, what if somebody is put on death row because of dodgy evidence and they shouldn't really be there? There are ongoing cases like Lucy Letby, who is accused of killing children in the NHS. Some people say, no, there's no way she did that. I have no idea, one way or another. But I can see a situation where it's possible that somebody is falsely accused. I've been falsely accused of being a danger to my children. And the courts go along with that. Somebody makes an accusation and it's really shit, because, and I can understand that people think, oh, well, there's no smoke without fire, he must have done something. And it's a reputation killer. And it's a minefield that I'm in the process of navigating. So I'm not supposed to speak about these things publicly, but this is done anonymously. That's part of the reason I decided to set up a new channel. But what I think we need to try to do as a society is make punishments more severe. And I think that means making prison less like a holiday destination. And without going down the road of unnecessary cruelty, but when you hear stories about, the prisoners have got flat screen TVs, they can play games all day, they can, acquire whatever drugs they want, they can have phones sneaked in for them. You hear of Muslim gangs running the prisons. I can hardly understand how that works. So I think the prisons should be more like prison camps from wartime. In a way, our country has been invaded. We are in a semi-warlike situation, and it is deteriorating. Things are getting worse. So many people are saying they would encourage young people to move abroad. And I understand the sentiment for that. However, I am here and I'm not planning on going anywhere. I feel patriotic to this country. My children are genetically half British, half Scandinavian. It's their home too, and I want to be able to pass on to them a decent country, a country where actions have consequences in a way that so often that is not the case. Now, part of the problem is this stupid suicidal empathy and mass immigration from other continents, not just other countries, but other continents. I think that is something which doesn't get focused on enough. If somebody is seeking asylum from a war zone, I think in terms of, international coherent policy, they should then look to the closest neighboring country where the culture and religion is more similar to their own, rather than going to somewhere that's thousands of miles away on a different continent and then arriving and then trying to change that culture to become more like where they are from. And there are people who come to this country and they appreciate it for the good qualities that it has, and they themselves. I work with people who are from Asia. I don't want to be too specific about the details, but they think that it's ridiculous that so many hostile foreigners are being welcomed in, and it is a case of far too many, far too quickly, and our civilization is not being given time to adjust, and our culture, our history, our heritage is being pissed away for no good reason. And so the people who are the policymakers who think this is a good thing, a lot of that goes back to people like Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell, and who has recently, I've heard, had some fairly negative things to say about Rupert Lowe. And one of the things Rupert Lowe keeps saying, and I think this is brilliant, when people accuse him of being a racist, he says, "I don't care," and that's a fantastic attitude to have. I don't care. Fling your shit at me. I don't care. Because I, for a long time, was persuaded by that accusation. You hear somebody saying, "Oh, so-and-so is a racist," and that's can be, and I think it still is for a lot of people. And I think that's what we need to wake more people up from. They hear, "Oh, so-and-so is accused of being a racist, like no smoke without fire. They must be a bad person, therefore it's not worth listening to them." And I'm discovering more and more that when you listen to what these so-called racists have to say, a lot of the time, they're not racist at all. Yes, they might have some in-group preference, but that's human nature. Who doesn't? You know, all these foreigners that congregate in their own enclaves, and they create like communities and colonies that resemble the countries that they came from. They do that, and nobody, or hardly anybody, has a bad thing to say about that. And it's so weird, the asymmetry, the way that with this cancer of political correctness, how it puts people into some kind of a hierarchy. It does the very thing that it's supposed to not do. You know, equality, all humans being equal. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. saying that the content of a person's character is more important than their skin color. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yet, even a lot of people the same skin color as myself from the same continent and part of the world, a lot of them go along with this shit. This woke, politically correct ideology. And it is baffling. And I think more people need to be woken up from it. I would say I never bought into it completely. I've always been skeptical, but you know, like with the racism label, I was partway down that route, and thanks to people like Carl Benjamin, who I've been listening to for quite a while, a so-called far-right activist, however you want to describe him. Of course, I don't agree with everything he says, but he has helped, and others too. So that's all I'm going to say for now, and standing on a very soggy bit of ground here. Whoa! So, thanks for watching, and see you next time.